My name is Marcos Cabral, and today my colleagues and I want to talk to you about a question that a lot of companies are having right now. Should employees be allowed to continue working remotely, or should they be forced to work full-time on site? So to start, I want you to think about how much time people spend commuting on average. Employees spend usually about an hour every day just getting to and from work. That adds up to about 5 hours a week, and that adds up to a little more than 250 hours a year. That's a significant amount of time that could be used for productivity, rest, or personal development. Over the past few years, remote work has become much more common, and many employees have adapted to that flexibility. But many companies are pushing for a full return to the office, and this is creating a major issue. So the problem is that employees are no longer satisfied with a rigid full-time in-office structure. In fact, according to the Pew Research Center, about 60% of workers with remote capable jobs prefer to work from home most of the time or all the time. This shows that flexibility is no longer just a preference, it's becoming an expectation. In addition, forcing employees back into the office can lead to lower morale and increased burnout. Many workers have experienced better work-life balance and reduced stress while working remotely, and taking that away can negatively impact both their well-being and their performance. Companies are also facing the risk of losing talent. A significant number of employees say that they would consider leaving their jobs if they were required to return full-time. This creates a serious challenge for business trying to retain their skilled employees. So overall, the push to return fully to the office is creating tension between companies and employees. So that brings me right back to the golden question. Should companies start forcing their employees to work on site full time, or should they keep allowing remote work? My colleague Josh is going to talk to you about potential solutions to this problem.
Thanks, Marcos. Appreciate you explaining what companies are going through right now when they have to ask each other the tough questions on what do we do? What do we do? How do we get back to the office, or are we just going to go full remote? So instead of choosing one or the other, many companies are starting to take a different approach. This approach is what they're calling it is a hybrid remote first model. And it's changing how companies think about work. Instead of asking, how do we get employees back into the office? They're asking, how do we make remote work the default? And what they're trying to do is use the office only when it adds value. That shift is what defines a remote first approach. So let me define the model here for you. So the hybrid remote first model means that employees primarily are working remotely, and the office is used intentionally for things like collaboration, meetings, or team events. The key idea is that work doesn't revolve around the office anymore. The office becomes a tool, not a requirement. So there's a few key characteristics of this type of a model, and that is that remote work is the default. Communication is a digital first type of communication. They use tools like Zoom or Slack, like we're using now. And you'd have to, right? You don't have that option of going back into the office or just stopping by someone's office and desk and talking about something. So that's going to be really that's going to be one of the big key characteristics is that digital first type of communication. One of the other key characteristics is that employees have the flexibility of not only when they work at home, right? Because it's mostly working from home, but they have flexibility on when they go into the office. So that's really nice for being able to plan things, doctor's appointments or events for kids or whatever for your kids. And the that the office is used instead of daily more intentionally, right? When do I need to be in the office, instead of this standard default of being in the office? So what this is doing for some companies is also by making sure that that's the remote versus that default. It's ensuring that remote employees aren't at a disadvantage compared to those that go into an office, where right now it does feel like those that are working remotely are a little more disadvantaged than those that are working in the office. So this model is becoming more popular because it solves some several major business challenges. First, it allows companies to hire from a much larger hiring pool, much larger talent pool. Instead of being limited to people that live near the office, they can go nationwide. Who knows? Maybe they can even go worldwide, right? The office I work for has like, I think it's a 75-mile, 80-mile radius that people need to live in to be able to work. If they want to work more remote, they can work that far out. Otherwise, you work within that radius. They want you in the office more often. Imagine if we could hire some really good talent that lived outside of the state, or maybe lived more than 100 miles away, where that would be a lot more difficult to get back into the office. We're missing out on those folks. So, secondly, it improves employee satisfaction and retention. So, the studies that we're seeing out there are that the remote workers actually are being more productive. I had an interview with the CEO of my company, and he explained something that I didn't know much about because I work in the office 100% of the time. But it really helped open my eyes to the productivity that happens outside of the office when you're working remote. So he told me that he works 10, 12-hour days, but when he's in the office on those 10, 12-hour days, he has hardly ever anything to show for what he did. He has helped a lot of people with their questions, given opinions on or helped make decisions, but he doesn't have a lot of deliverable. And when he works remote, he does have a lot more deliverables because he doesn't have a lot of interruptions. We've got an open door policy there at work. So people are always stopping by and, oh, I'm glad that you're here. I need your help with something. I've got a question, and he's working on something and now he's getting interrupted. The time that takes to get back into focus is something that he doesn't have to experience when he's working out remotely. So I thought that was really big. I would throw in there that maybe that wouldn't happen as often if he was in the office more often. It's only because he works remote and now he's in the office. People are probably in his office more often. Just throwing that out there. It could be a factor that we're not throwing in there, but something that came to mind as I was explaining this one. So who knows? We'd have to do some research on that. So the impact of this is huge, not just on productivity, but on being able to hire good employees as well. So it's not just about flexibility. It's a business decision that can improve the performance of the folks that you have and help you gain talent that you didn't have before. So instead of forcing employees into the office or going fully remote, this hybrid remote first model gives company the best of both worlds. Excuse me, sorry about that with the slides. It gives the companies the best of both worlds. Employees get the flexibility, and companies still have the ability to bring people together when it actually matters. So this shift is changing how companies structure their teams and their operations. And that leads into Alex's part of the presentation. He's going to talk more about how companies are actually implementing these models and what that looks like in practice. So Alex, you can take it from here.
Thank you, Joshua, for handing over that spotlight. So now I really want to focus on some of the examples that these companies are doing and using to really enforce these hybrid methods, right? So I really want to focus today on Google, Microsoft, and Amazon. So we're going to start off with Google. One of the methods or examples that they're using is a 3-day hybrid schedule. So this one is pretty self-explanatory. It's 3 days in the office, and then the rest of the days are remote. This one allows for collaboration while giving employees that flexibility and those nice schedules. And then the next example for Google is the work from anywhere program. So this one, again, pretty straightforward. It's where you work from different locations for different portions of the year. So I think this one's actually really cool because it allows those employees that want to, live in different cities, explore, travel, and just do different things. It gives them that kind of like nomad lifestyle that a lot of people crave. And I think that one's awesome because, it gives them the chance to really do that and indulge in that experience. Another example from Google is something that they call productivity over presence. So what these companies are doing, especially Google, is that they're doing these hybrid programs as long as the employees stay productive. So when you have these employees that are craving these schedules and they finally get them, I think it's cool what Google is doing because they're basically saying like, as long as you give us results and you show up and you do what you have to do, we will reward you with these amazing schedules, super flexible, working from home and in the office. And that's a luxury. I mean, especially nowadays, like with so many people, young people wanting to, travel and kind of just like explore the world and just like, do other things. I think it's really cool because this model allows them to do that, right? So I think Google is killing it in that department. Then we also have their last example that I have here, which is the office redesign for collaboration. So in other words, what Google is doing is that they're creating, in their office spaces in their buildings, they're creating meeting pods, collaboration areas, places where these employees can feel safe and open up and talk about ideas and brainstorm. But what I mean by that really is like they're creating open spaces, right? Places with big windows, offices, buildings with big windows, with lots of natural lighting coming in. So when you have beautiful buildings like this, these employees, they come to work and they're like, wow, like this place is amazing, right? Like I can actually open up and feel great here. And I'm not enclosed in a cubicle and it's dark and it's sad and you feel tight. And, a workspace makes a big difference. And then also just like entertainment, right? In these offices, Google is adding things like, ping pong tables, consoles, right? And which is funny because when you go to work, I mean, you don't think of like having fun. You're there to work, right? But I think what Google is doing, their strategy is very smart because, on their lunch breaks or on their, their free time, they can kind of go into these spaces and like feel like they're not at work and they can kind of disengage for a second because the human brain, I mean, we all need a break, right? For a little bit. So I think it's really cool that they're adding these types of things into their office spaces and buildings. Now I want to shift gears to Amazon and some of the examples and things that they're doing. So with Amazon, they're doing something called remote roles in select departments. So in other words, they are offering full remote positions, especially in the tech and those specialized portions, right? So those roles that really don't require you to come into the office at all, it can now be fully remote. And I think that a lot of people like want that, especially nowadays, where some people don't want to show up to an office or commute, right? Because as my peers mentioned earlier, right, the hidden costs of commuting. Lots of people don't want to do that, and that's totally understandable with gas being expensive nowadays and all that. So another thing that Amazon is doing is they have tech to support distributed teams. So in other words, Amazon is using systems that make remote work available and possible at the global stage, right? Which I think is amazing. Amazon is really taking it to the next level. They're saying, hey, like, we don't care where you are in the world. You can work with us as long as you have a computer and internet connection, we will pay you, right? And I think that's amazing because it really brings a company, it gives it a whole different perspective and angle. And you now have people that, are working with you worldwide. Like it is amazing, right? Technology nowadays. And then the final example that I want to talk about with Amazon specifically is the employee benefits through competition, right? So what this means is that because there are so many employees that are craving these flexible schedules, companies are now having people compete for these roles, right? They're not easy to get, but it really, what this is doing is it's attracting talent. It's attracting good employees who are bright and brilliant and have amazing ideas because they want these flexible schedules, right? They're not easy to get, and people know that, so they're willing to work and prove themselves to get these. So I think that is amazing. These are some of the examples, again, that these companies are using to really enforce this hybrid model. and kind of keep their employees motivated and happy in the workspace. In conclusion, I kind of just want to like wrap it all up. We need to be advocating for flexible work environments, right? I think it's important to note that it's not the world that we live in today is a lot different than what it was 20 years ago, right? It was like technology and everything. And after COVID, nothing's been the same, right? We know that. So I think it's important to understand that like these companies need to adapt, and less people are actually quitting because of the hybrid model. And I actually want to showcase that here, right? Give you guys a little bit of visualization. So what's happening is that with these hybrid models, we're having happier employees, right? Better retention. And there's actually a Stanford study that showed that there's a 33% decrease in turnover, right? In other words, less people are quitting because of these hybrid models. They're showing up to work, they're doing remote, and they're doing days in the office, and it's paying off, right? Because we're getting results. And it just shows that that healthy work-life balance is a real thing. We need to value that. And more companies need to be advocating for that. And then on the other hand, we have, right, the burnout and the higher turnover with the red side, which is where these companies aren't advocating for the hybrid models, and it is resulting in higher turnover. So in conclusion, again, let's advocate for flexible work environments today. And yeah, let's make the world a better place. So I really appreciate you guys listening to our presentation today. And thank you.